She woke up in a millionaire's mansion with no memory of how she got there. Only a strange tattoo hidden beneath her collarbone and the phantom echoes of a haunting past she couldn't grasp. Panic mingled with pain as she navigated this luxurious prison, unsure if the man who rescued her was a savior or something far more complicated. Who was she? And why was Donovan Hale, a man notoriously guarded, suddenly risking his empire to protect a ghost? The biting chill of the late autumn air did little to deter Donovan Hale. It was nearly midnight, his preferred hour, when the relentless demands of his life ceased. He walked the familiar forested trail bordering Kingsborough, the crunch of leaves under his expensive shoes the only sound breaking the profound silence. This nightly ritual was a sanctuary, a space where a reclusive, philanthropic millionaire didn't have to perform, explain, or engage. He sought the stillness, the anonymity the darkness offered. Tonight, however, the familiar solitude was fractured as he approached the ancient, sprawling sycamore tree near the park's central fountain. Its stone basin dry and filled with leaves, his gaze snagged on something unexpected, a dark shape huddled on the cold, unforgiving wood of a park bench. His first thought, tinged with mild annoyance, was of a vagrant seeking shelter. Kingsborough had its share, despite its affluent veneer. But as Donovan drew closer, the ambient glow from a distant street lamp illuminated the figure, and his steps faltered, his breath hitched. This was no grizzled drifter. Curled into a tight ball against the cold was a young woman. Her skin was unervingly pale, marred by angry bruises blooming on her cheek and jaw. Her clothes, once likely presentable, were torn and dirty. A thin, dark trail of dried blood snaked from her hairline down her temple, stark against her pallor. She was utterly still, unconscious. A strange mix of protectiveness and alarm surged through him. This wasn't his world. Rescuing damsels wasn't his playbook. Yet, the sight of her vulnerability, abandoned under the indifferent stars, resonated with a part of him he kept carefully locked away. Without a second thought, the ingrained habit of command took over. He shrugged off his heavy wool coat, draping it gently over her shivering form before carefully, almost reverently, scooping her slight weight into his arms. She felt fragile, like a broken bird. He pulled out his phone, his voice low but firm as he instructed his driver, already waiting nearby. "Marcus, bring the car to the park entrance. Now, and alert Mrs. Gable. We have an unexpected guest requiring medical attention." The short ride back to his sprawling mansion, usually a silent buffer between his public and private life, was thick with unspoken tension. The vast, opulent halls, which often felt cavernous and echoing with his solitude, were suddenly filled with quiet, controlled urgency as his trusted housekeeper and a physician he kept on retainer worked swiftly to care for the unknown woman. Donovan stood back, watching, a strange disquiet settling over him. The predictable rhythm of his life had just been irrevocably broken. 2 days passed in a haze of monitored rest and quiet observation. The woman finally surfaced in the depths of unconsciousness, her eyelids fluttering open to reveal eyes the color of stormy seas. She found herself not on a cold park bench, but enveloped in the soft luxury of high-thread count sheets, sunlight streaming through the tall windows of an elegantly appointed guest room overlooking a meticulously manicured private garden. Confusion warred with a primal fear. Where was she? How did she get here? She tried to sit up, a sharp gasp escaping her lips as pain flared through her ribs and head. Donovan, who had been sitting quietly in an armchair near the doorway pretending to read a book, rose smoothly at her movement. He approached the bed slowly, careful not to startle her further. His voice was soft, measured. "Easy now. You're safe here. You were unconscious in the park the other night. I brought you here. My name is Donovan Hale." Her eyes, wide and cautious, scanned his face, searching for threat, finding only a calm, if unreadable, neutrality. A flicker of relief softened her expression, quickly followed by a wave of bewilderment. "The park?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. I don't remember anything. How I got there, who?" She trailed off, pressing fingers to her aching temple. "My name? I think it's Alara." The uncertainty in her own voice scared her more than the unfamiliar surroundings. Over the subsequent days, Donovan afforded her space and quiet, ensuring her medical needs were met and her privacy respected. He instructed his staff to be discreet and attentive. As Alara slowly regained some physical strength, fragments of memory began to surface, jagged and terrifying. She spoke of disjointed images, the sterile gleam of an upscale office building, a man's voice distorted by anger, the heart-pounding terror of a chase through dark alleyways, the blinding impact, and then nothing but suffocating darkness. Each recovered piece felt like a shard of glass, painful to hold. The trauma was palpable, a heavy shroud she wore. Even the full narrative remained frighteningly blank. Donovan listened patiently, offering quiet reassurance but never pressing for details she couldn't provide. As the days bled into a week, Alara's physical wounds began to heal, but the restlessness of her fractured memory kept her perpetually on edge. Staying confined to a luxurious guest suite felt like being caged. Tentatively, she began to venture out, exploring the quiet grandeur of the mansion. She wasn't asked to do anything, yet she found herself needing tasks to anchor her drifting thoughts. She started small, carefully tending to the wilting orchids in the vast conservatory, bringing a quiet order to the scattered books in Donovan's immense study, even hesitantly offering to help the kind, motherly housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, with meal preparations. It was an obligation. It was a way to feel grounded, useful, less like a lost soul adrift in someone else's life. Donovan, accustomed to the silent, efficient running of his household, found himself unexpectedly intrigued by this quiet disruption. He observed her tentative movements, her careful touch with the plants, the focused frown as she alphabetized the shelf of his oldest first editions. He saw resilience beneath the vulnerability, a core of strength that surprised him. He had built his empire on logic, on shrewd analysis and emotional detachment. Yet, around Alara, he felt those carefully constructed walls developing hairline cracks. She had a way of looking at him, not with the awe or calculation he usually encountered, but with simple, direct curiosity. She asked questions no one else dared to voice. "Why are all your family photos so old?" she inquired one afternoon, dusting a silver frame. Another time, watching him interact stiffly with a business associate on a video call, she commented softly, "Your smile doesn't quite reach your eyes when you talk business, does it?" Her observations were unervingly astute, peeling back layers he kept hidden even from himself. Despite the gaping holes in her past and the inherent risk she represented, Donovan found himself trusting her presence. It was a logical, instinctual feeling, a dangerous deviation from his norm, yet undeniably comforting in the echoing silence of his life. The late morning sun warmed the tiles surrounding the indoor pool. Alara, finding solace in the rhythmic repetition of laps, had just finished her swim. Donovan, having concluded an early call, walked in to offer her a thick, warm towel, a small gesture that had become part of their tentative routine. As she reached for it, her damp hair falling back and the collar of her borrowed robe shifting slightly, his eyes caught a glimpse of dark ink just beneath her collarbone. It was faint, partially hidden but unmistakable, a stylized glyph, stark black against her pale skin. His easy expression vanished, replaced by an abrupt, chilling stillness. His hand, holding the towel, froze midair. Recognition slammed into him like a physical blow. He knew that symbol. It was a mark of Arcanix Technologies, a ruthless, sprawling tech conglomerate led by Damian Stroud. Stroud was more than a rival. He was a predator who had nearly destroyed Donovan's own company, Solarion, years ago through corporate espionage and a vicious campaign of sabotage, framing key personnel and stealing valuable prototypes. The battle had cost Donovan dearly, hardening him in ways he rarely acknowledged. He forced himself to breathe, to keep his voice level, masking the sudden turmoil inside. "Alara," he said, the name feeling heavy on his tongue. He met her curious gaze. "That tattoo, where did you get it?" She looked down, startled, touching the spot beneath her collarbone, as if noticing for the first time, though some flicker of deeper, buried recognition seemed to cross her face. Confusion clouded her eyes. I don't know," she stammered, pulling the robe tighter. A shadow of fear returned. "I don't remember getting it, but I have this feeling, this awful feeling, that someone put it there, that I didn't want it." Her voice trembled, the implication hanging heavy in the suddenly silent room. Donovan's mind raced, connecting fragmented dots, the mystery surrounding Alara taking on a far more sinister and personal dimension. The fragile peace shattered almost overnight. Anonymous leaks began to surface online. Grainy photographs showing Alara, looking younger and decidedly uncomfortable, standing near Arcanix's insignia. Whispers grew into headlines, fueled by carefully placed sources, hinting she was a disgruntled former employee who vanished after a major scandal involving stolen proprietary technology. Technology remarkably similar to Project Solarion was known to be developing. Then, Damien Stroud himself stepped into the spotlight. With calculated precision and feigned concern, he held a press conference. He identified Alara, painted her as a brilliant but unstable engineer, a corporate fugitive who betrayed Arcanix and fled with sensitive data. He insinuated Donovan Hale was irresponsibly, perhaps even knowingly, harboring a dangerous criminal. The media storm exploded. Reporters swarmed the gates of Donovan's estate like locusts. News vans lined the quiet street, their satellite dishes pointed accusingly at the mansion. Solarian stock price dipped sharply. Anxious shareholders bombarded Donovan's office with calls. His board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The message unanimous and urgent. Distance himself from the woman immediately. Cut her loose before she dragged the entire company down. Donovan listened to the demands, the threats, the panic projections. He looked at the fear in Alara's eyes, the way she flinched every time a news alert chimed. He thought of Stroud's smug face on the screen, the familiar taste of his rival's manipulative tactics. And something inside him solidified. He refused. Calling his own impromptu press conference on the steps of his mansion, facing the barrage of cameras and shouting reporters, Donovan Hale stood taller than usual. His voice, amplified by microphones, cut through the clamor. "There's a woman staying in my home, recovering from trauma, the specifics of which are not your concern," he stated, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. "I have seen the reports. I have heard Mr. Stroud's allegations. But I also know the person residing under my roof. I know she is frightened, and I know she is not the calculating fugitive the world is suddenly being told she is. Until credible evidence proves otherwise, evidence not manufactured by a known competitor, she will remain here, protected, respected, and trusted." Inside, watching a live broadcast on a large screen in the living room, Alara felt her breath catch. The accusations had terrified her, dredging up murky feelings of guilt and panic she couldn't explain. But hearing Donovan's unwavering defense, his public declaration of faith in her, when the world seemed ready to condemn her, it broke something within her. Tears streamed down her face. Not tears of fear this time, but of overwhelming, staggering gratitude. No one, in the fragmented memory she possessed, had ever stood up for her like this. No one had ever fought for her. Donovan's public defiance bought them time, but it didn't silence the wolves. He knew Stroud wouldn't back down. The attack was too calculated. To fight back effectively, they needed more than instinct. They needed facts. Donovan spared no expense, hiring a discreet but highly effective team of private investigators, tasking them with uncovering the truth about Alara's past and her connection to Arcanix, no matter how damning it might be. The investigators worked quickly and quietly, digging through digital footprints, interviewing obscure contacts, and navigating a labyrinth of corporate deception. When the final report landed on Donovan's desk, he and Alara read it together in the tense quiet of his study. The truth, when it finally emerged from the fog of amnesia and accusation, was both shocking and heartbreaking. Alara, whose real name was indeed Alara Vance, was a gifted data engineer. She hadn't sought out Arcanix. She had been coerced. Damien Stroud, learning of her younger brother's minor involvement in an online betting ring, had orchestrated a complex legal entrapment scheme, framing the young man for serious financial fraud. Facing her brother's ruin and potential imprisonment, Stroud presented Alara with an ultimatum: work for Arcanix on a clandestine project involving ethically dubious data acquisition, or he would ensure her brother faced the maximum penalty. She was trapped, forced into a role she despised, essentially blackmailed into complicity. The tattoo wasn't a badge of loyalty. It was a brand, marking her as Stroud's possession. Her disappearance wasn't an escape with stolen secrets. It was a desperate flight from captivity. She had discovered the true, illegal extent of the project she was working on and had attempted to gather evidence against Stroud. He found out. The chase she vaguely remembered was real. Arcanic security pursuing her after she bolted. She had managed to evade them, injured and terrified, eventually collapsing on that park bench where Donovan found her, the trauma mercifully wiping her memory clean, armed with documented evidence. Financial records proving the blackmail, internal Arcanix communications, witness statements from former colleagues terrified of Stroud, Donovan, and Alara didn't just refute Stroud's claims. They launched a powerful countersuit. They detailed the coercion, the illegal data harvesting, and Stroud's history of predatory practices. They released the evidence to select reputable journalists. The narrative shifted almost instantaneously. Headlines screamed of corporate blackmail and exploitation. Sympathy and outrage poured in for Alara. Donations arrived unexpectedly at Donovan's company, not for Solarion, but earmarked for Alara Vance, often accompanied by notes from strangers who had faced similar abuses of power from large institutions or controlling individuals. The ashes of Stroud's smear campaign revealed a story not a betrayal, but a survival. The legal battles eventually concluded, largely in their favor, but the glare of the public eye, even when sympathetic, felt exhausting. Seeking refuge from the storm, Donovan and Alara made a quiet decision. They retreated from the relentless pace of Kingsborough and the corporate world. They purchased a modest, slightly neglected estate in a sleepy coastal town, far from the prying lenses and echoing whispers. But this wasn't just an escape. It was a new beginning with a shared purpose. Instead of restoring the estate for private luxury, they poured their resources and energy into transforming it. They established the Leora Foundation, named after Alara's forgotten middle name, recovered during the investigation, a name that symbolized light and healing. The Leora Foundation became a sanctuary, a safe haven for women escaping situations mirroring Alara's own ordeal and worse, those fleeing abusive corporate environments, battling unjust legal systems, or recovering from the trauma of trafficking and exploitation. The mansion that Donovan had once inhabited in echoing solitude, and the guest room where Alara had woken in fear, were now filled with the sounds of tentative laughter, shared stories, and the quiet hum of healing. Together, Donovan and Alara launched practical programs, workshops on financial literacy and digital security, transitional housing assistance, therapy resources, and legal aid connections. Alara, who had once been forced to use her genius in secret for nefarious purposes, found her voice. She began speaking publicly, not just about her own story, but about the critical need for ethical innovation, corporate responsibility, and protecting vulnerable individuals within powerful systems. Donovan stood beside her, not as a rescuer anymore, but as a partner, channeling his business acumen into managing the foundation, finding a deeper fulfillment than quarterly profits had ever provided. 2 years slipped by, marked by the quiet rhythm of coastal life and the meaningful work of the foundation. One cool autumn evening, mirroring the night they first met, Donovan led Alara back to Kingsborough Park. They sat on the very same bench beneath the ancient sycamore tree, though the air now held no chill of fear, only the comfortable warmth of shared history. There, under the soft glow of the park lights, Donovan turned to her. He didn't offer grand pronouncements or promises of a flawless future. Instead, he spoke of partnership, of the strength they had found not just in surviving, but in building something new from a wreckage. He spoke of continued growth, unwavering honesty, and facing whatever came next together. He asked her to marry him. Alara looked at him, seeing not the millionaire who had rescued her, but the man who had stood by her, believed in her, and helped her reclaim her life and forge a new purpose. She said yes, not out of debt or obligation, but because in their shared journey, transforming pain into power, they had discovered a love that was resilient, authentic, and deeply rooted. Their wedding was held not in a grand ballroom, but in the gardens of the Leora Foundation. It was an intimate affair, bathed in the warm light of late afternoon. Their guests weren't society figures or corporate giants, but the women whose lives they had touched through the foundation, the dedicated staff, and a few trusted friends. There were no paparazzi, no tabloid headlines, Just heartfelt vows exchanged under an open sky, surrounded by the tangible evidence of the life they had built together. In finding each other on that cold night, Donovan and Alara hadn't just found love. They'd found home, not merely a place on a map, but a profound sense of belonging, purpose, and peace within each other's souls. Love isn't always born in fairy tales. It sometimes begins beneath a sycamore tree, in the arms of a stranger who simply refused to walk away. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories of love, resilience, and redemption